G'day friends, my name is James of James Burke Creative and welcome to another month of ArtSnacks Box Freestyle, where we take the suppliers from the June 2022 ArtSnacks Plus box, experiment with them to within an inch of their lives and then hopefully create a masterpiece for the hashtag ArtSnacks Challenge. This month's fun fact is an echo from last month's fun fact, and I finally got my hair cut off. It is short, it's light, it's fresh, I'm ready for summer and I'm so happy it's finally gone. I did enjoy the 2-year journey, but it was really ready to go. So here we are, fresh face, fresh hair, fresh everything. Let's get into the video, see what we have to play with today. Alrighty, here is the June 2022 ArtSnacks Plus box. Here's everything inside. Let's unwrap that little green burrito and take a closer look at what we'll be playing with today. First up in the ArtSnacks Plus box, we have the Hahnemuhle Nostalgia Sketchbook, 6 inches by 8 inches. We have a Faber-Castell journaling art set that I'm excited to dive into, as well as 2 Copic sketch markers. The colors I got were RV55, Hollyhock, and BG72 Ice Ocean. We have a General's drafting pencil, as well as a General's Factus Extra Soft eraser, a Faber-Castell Grip Trio pencil sharpener, and a snack and a sticker. Let's get set up to play. First things I'm swatching out in this beautiful little journal are the Faber-Castell journaling set, which is fabulous for me. You know, I love my art journaling. I'm all about it. So I just wanted to let you know what was in that set. It came with that little stencil, which I thought was really cute. I think that's more for bullet journaling, which is not so much what I would do with a beautiful little journal like this. I would probably use a gridded journal if I was going to do that. But I can totally understand why that's in there. It's very popular, but those little shapes became useful for me as a little template for something I do later, which was fun. The pens in that set, I didn't go through them individually, so I'll just mention them now. There's a Faber-Castell Pitt Artist pen. It's a size small and it was black. And that one, it's India ink, so it is waterproof. It's got that high light fastness, also known as fade proof. Sometimes it's written that way. Some things, even though they're waterproof, they can be kind of activated. You really need to let that ink sit into the paper, especially something like a really heavy India ink. It tends to be really, really intense, rich black, but it does need to kind of dry down a little bit, and you can scrub it back to life sometimes with certain materials. Certain water-based pens might revive some of that ink sometimes if it hasn't fully dried. So smudging does sometimes happen. I would always just, I would never believe that just because something was waterproof doesn't mean it will never smudge. It will do a great job, but things like that, especially with different paper types, can be a little, you have to experiment. You just have to try it to see if it'll work, to be honest. And it's usually like water-based markers that will reactivate it. Alcohol-based markers are completely different, and they usually won't have much of a problem with smudging things like India ink once it's dried down. So it's all very interesting, but this is why we do that testing phase at the beginning, our little experimentation. You can see that highlighter just completely reactivated the ink in that black pen, but something like the alcohol marker didn't really smudge it as much as that highlighter did. That highlighter, the text liner, is water-based, so it's going to do that. Anyway, back onto the pens in that little set. The second one I swatched out was the Pitt Artist Pen Fine Liner. I got a 0.3 and it was cobalt green. The number is 156. It was a really beautiful little teal pen. The brush pen has a B on the end of it, so you know it's a brush. It's a Pitt Artist brush pen, and the color is leaf green, number 112, and the Faber-Castell text liner 38. I got fluorescent yellow. I'm sure you can tell by the images flashing up on your screen. It is very, very punch you in the face fluorescent yellow. I really appreciate that. I think if you're going to go fluorescent, just go insane with it. Go as fluorescent as you can go. Go glowing. Just glow the page. That's what I feel like. And I really lean into that because for the longest time I actually hated highlighters. I hated the way they looked. I hated fluorescence as an aesthetic, but I have actually I've grown to love it. I've grown to enjoy it and appreciate it, especially for this little application I'm doing here where I'm using a lot of the overlapping mediums to kind of optically blend together in a really loose, unstructured kind of way. And I love that there's this kind of glowing underneath, this kind of radium looking skin underneath. And that's just from a few light layers that are done really haphazardly. So you can really tell that if you want to go to town with some of these techniques, you can get some really interesting effects that, you don't really ever think of when you're thinking of highlighters. I know for me, highlighters were just, probably why I didn't like them, because they remind me of school. Not that school's bad, but studying, having to highlight textbooks, and it was just, it's very I don't ever feel like I ever really enjoyed highlighters that much. And visually, I felt like they were colors that were really hard to work with because they stand out so much. They bring a lot of attention to something. But using them in these kind of experimental ways and making them the base of skin tones, or making them the base of highlights that I want to, you know, kind of have pop out later, I think that was actually a really fun kind of little discovery, little journey for me to go on, because I do find that there's a good value to that. There's something of a luminous quality underneath those other layers, kind of lightly layered on top. Anyway, I'm gonna get myself sidetracked. Here we are, just putting everything together. The one part of this experimentation I did find probably the most useful for what I ended up doing with the challenge is layering the pens and the markers over the top of each other, doing that little patchwork kind of grid. Also just making those two lines and swatching everything over the top. They may look like almost the same color, but you can see having the base of that Copic marker be blue and then having the base of it be pink, you can see slight tonal variations between each once you layer the other medium on top. And I really like that. I think it's valuable to have even those slightly different tones. This becomes really apparent if you've ever seen painting and someone does an underpainting. So if you have a canvas and then you make the whole underpainting red, there will be a slight tonal quality difference if the underpainting was just left, or if it was left white, the canvas was just left white, or if it was blue. Blue would kind of shift all the colors that lay on top of it. Even if it seems like it's an opaque color, it's not going to shift everything. It really does. There's some even slight subtle differences that we may not notice, you know, straight away, but they are in there. And I kind of think that's really cool. Even, you know, with mediums like this, not oil paints and not doing a big fancy painting, but we can still kind of get those really subtle variations, especially in the green. Look at the green on the blue and the pink bars. You can kind of see the difference there is really subtle, but it is different. So this was all the experimentation. I'm gonna let you watch my first attempt at the Art Snack Challenge and then come back when I realize I didn't want to do this anymore. And there we go. I like to say I successfully failed my first attempt. I had a bit of a false start there. You saw my hand going in there to erase it so many times, and I wanted to show you in real time what that looks like, of that anticipation to, oh, do I erase it again? Do I do it again? Do you know what? Sometimes flip the page. There, I said it. You all have my permission. Flip the page. If you've got an art journal and you're going to erase a mistake that many times, sometimes I think you just need a fresh start. Go back, stick something over the top of the other one later, go back and erase it another day. I don't think it's worth fighting something that many times to get it right. And that's, you know, that's only advice for me, because to be honest, if I erase something too many times that I see as a mistake, something clicks in my brain. I actually get really upset about it. So I have learned that to manage my own experience well, if I'm erasing something too many times, I have to let go of it, because I'm only going to, you know, kind of swim upstream at that point. So I flipped the page and I decided, you know what? I'm going to work with it. If my hand just can't draw those proportions right now, I'm going to go and do something wonky where it doesn't matter what the proportions look like. It can be as skewed as possible. And I came up with this lovely little fairy. I decided to create a fairy garden because I love fairies as much as I love mermaids. And I've always loved the idea of fairies in my garden. And it gave me a chance to kind of narrow down, I'd say narrow really loosely, but, you know, have a theme to work with and explore intuitively all these kinds of illustration styles. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm looking at the supplies I have to use, and I'm just using them the way that I did in the experimentation, layering them over things, using them for different textures to try and achieve different colors or different effects, you know, especially with the fluorescent yellow to get that luminous skin underneath. Just different effects and layering techniques to be able to create different looking fairies. And this is all an exploratory process. I'm not actually trying to create a finished piece here. I'm just trying to fit in all of my exploration, all of my experimentations next to each other. So consider it the same idea as when you're swatching everything out, except instead of just drawing squares, you're actually drawing your finished pieces. You're still getting to know your supplies. You're not expecting to be able to understand all of them. You can absolutely still make mistakes putting it all together. You can use the wrong mix. You can accidentally mix something you shouldn't have mixed. You know, you can make a bad color on there. It's all fine. It's all in the name of getting to know your supplies better, because I do believe as many times as we swatch something out, the experience of actually drawing what you would typically draw with them will give you a better understanding than anything else. So in essence, this is more of a swatching technique that I like to do, and it's not even really a swatching technique, it's literally just going for it. You get the pen, you get the pencil, you put it in your hand, you just go for it. Learn through doing it, through using it. I think it's probably the most valuable way to do it. And that's why the ArtSnacks Challenge is great, because it narrows it down to these new supplies that you have, and you really have to get acquainted with them by being resourceful, by using only what you have, mixing them together, trying to see what you can do to blend them, just with each other, to optically blend them, how you can even get your fingers involved to create smudging kind of effects. I mean, it's just all about playing with the supplies, and I think you obviously know that by now, but it always bears repeating. And this process in particular is fun because once I've fit all of my experimentations together, and I especially love this little guy because he looks transparent, and I love that little smudgy glow. It almost looks like he's like a ghost fairy because you can see right through him. Kind of like Casper. I love that at the end of it, I am left with a full finished piece. But it is all just experimentation. It's all just in the name of getting to know the supplies better. And having a theme like Fairy Garden just keeps my brain from having to decide what I'm going to draw. It doesn't have to be Fairy Gardens, but I would always try and do something you love the most, because you'll find it a lot more inspirational. You'll be a bit more motivated to see it through. Like, I would never choose to do this with animals because it would just stress me out. I don't love to draw animals. It's like drawing a whole page of hands for me. It's just not going to happen. I do it once in a blue moon just to see if I can, just to satisfy a curiosity. But yeah, no, absolutely not. So I draw fairies, I draw mermaids, I'll draw fashion figures, I'll draw faces. I love to draw faces. And just because we're art journaling, I put in the ArtSnacks sticker as well. I've talked to you about art journaling before, and like I said, I could talk about art journaling for more minutes than YouTube would ever let me upload, but just to repeat everything I've said before, I love art journaling so much, especially for things like this. This page, it comes together, just because it does, because you're experimenting with everything, you're drawing all these fairies, but you learn things along the way, and then suddenly they take on certain meaning. Like if you look at the fairy down the bottom, that was the ArtSnacks sticker. I cut it up, I collaged it together. You don't even need glue because it's already adhesive on the back, and I tried to make a fairy out of it. That fairy is probably the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my whole life. Like, I'm going to take it as a kind of like a victory. Like, I've created the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Not really, but it's pretty intense. I mean, it's not a fairy that looks like any of the other ones on the page, but it will only ever serve as a reminder to me to be more resourceful. When I cut that sticker up and put it down, I was suddenly reminded that I had a box that I could cut up. I had packaging that I could cut up. The little cards that come with the descriptions, I can cut that up. Everything in the box that isn't art supplies is also usable, and especially, and it only really kind of resonated with me because I was using the art journal. I was like, this is what I do with art journaling. You're not allowed to throw anything away in my house. If it's a piece of trash, if it needs to go in my art journal, it has to run by me first. Like, my husband won't throw anything out before he says, do you want this for your journal? It could be the sticker on an apple, and yes, I do want it. I actually have 2 journals that are fully dedicated to things that should probably be in the trash, and I call them garbage journals. And I love them probably more than most of the other journals that I have. I do love all the ones that I illustrate and paint in, obviously, I love those. But yeah, I mean, art journaling to me is so amazing because you're using all the art supplies, you're having fun with them all. There's usually, for me anyway, there's low expectation to create anything. It all lives in one place, and especially if you're someone that goes chronologically, you do get a really good sense of your journey when you flip through it. When you're just flipping from page to page, you're spanning, a whole bunch of time and learning, and you get to visually see the growth that you have within the art journal. I can't ever feel that way about the way I, drew and painted before art journaling, because they were all just loose sheets of paper that, were lost to the wind. I don't even know where half of them are anymore, and the rest that I do have, they're still in a folder somewhere that, doesn't get flipped through because it's all just loose papers that go nuts. Everything I do now, I try to put in an art journal because I love to flip through them, and as I'm flipping through them, I get to see pages like this, and I know how this came together. I know why this was. I know that I was doing this because I'm doing an ArtSnacks challenge. I'm doing this because I'm experimenting with the art supplies. I'm getting to know them better. But there are all these other meanings that start to attach themselves throughout the process. The fact that I did fairies is a reminder to me that you love fairies. Like, no matter where I end up in life, there will always be that inner child in me that just loves fairies and believes that there are fairies living down at the bottom of my garden. So this little fairy garden, I mean, it's immediately evocative of that thought, that part of my life. And I like to think that creating art surrounding stuff like that is celebrating those parts of yourself. I know I'm starting to sound a little woo-woo here, but just stick with me. Art journaling has done that to me. Art journaling has made me really focus on things that are super sentimental, and it has made me value things in a way that I just never did before. Suddenly, you know, things like swing tags on clothes mean something to me, because as I go on a health journey, I see the swing tag go from, you know, a certain size down to another size. And to me, there's a celebration in that because it represents success. Now, you would never think that when you walk through Target, just to notice those two things. But when they're side by side in my journal, they mean something to me and the way that I think of myself and how I'm doing. All of that for me exists in an art journal. The fairies, that's just my inner child. Cutting up the sticker to make that hideous fairy, that's resourcefulness. That's using everything you've got, not just the supplies, but the packaging they came in. There's so much that I get out of the process, and it usually just reveals more and more layers of understanding to me as I go. I would love for you to keep an art journal. Just fill it with anything and everything. There we go. There is our final piece for this month's ArtSnacks challenge. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you would like to join ArtSnacks, you can do so using the code JAMES10 at checkout for 10% off. And don't forget to share your work with us in the ArtSnacks community on the Mix and also on social media using the hashtag ArtSnacks challenge. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye.